The Deputy Nationals Leader David Littleproud joins us live. Minister, good morning to you. Thanks for your time as always. So let's start off with that new poll that's out this morning. It's got the two leaders neck and neck. Are we on track for a hung parliament?
Oh, look, I think there's a frightening realisation by the Australian public that they might wake up with Anthony Albanese Sunday morning. And I think they're starting to understand that he can't hide forever. He's going to have to square up with them and tell them the truth about his costings. And every afternoon at 5:30, Anthony wipes that sweat off his brow and goes, thank God there's a couple of 100,000 more that have gone through those pre-polls without knowing our costings, our plan of how we're going to pay and spend your money. And this is a frightening thing that I think Australians are starting to get to the realisation as we get to this pointy end. And this is where I think we're always going to end up. This is going to be a tight election. It was always going to be a tight election, and I think now the real ruler has to be run over both parties in terms of how they're going to manage our economy. We've done a great job in getting us to where we are, but we need to shift gears. And who's best to take control of the gear shift now? Us, who's proven we've got us to where we are, but now need to make sure that we get our spending right to keep inflation in check, keep employment up. Those are the types of things that you have to have a plan for. We've got this thing called a budget. We put it in the Parliament. We're prepared to put it in black and white. We were open with the Australian people. We said, this is how we will empower you to make sure we keep you employed, we grow the pie, we pay for the services that you enjoy now and want improved.
OK, just back to those polls just for one more this morning. So the primary vote's got Labor at 31%. It's got the Coalition at 34%, but it's locked alongside the minor parties and the independents. How concerned are you about Nationals' votes bleeding out to those minor parties?
Well, I think that the real risk is that we will see the business plan of Anthony Albanese come through. Because, see, the magic number on election night is 76 to get in number of seats. But what Anthony Albanese can do already is rely on 3 or 4 crossbenchers at least that are already there. And so he only really, instead of having to win 7 seats net off us, he really only has to win about 3 or 4. So if he wins 3 or 4 and the independents win another 3 or 4 for him, then it fits right within Labor's business model of being able to sneak into government with a minority Green backing and with independents that will cause chaos and mayhem, not just for our economy, but for our national sovereignty and security. And so this is the frightening thing that we're saying to Australians, that you are going to have to make a choice. We get that you've been frustrated by what we've had to do over the last 2 years. But we are in a better place than any other nation in the world. In fact, I'll even preface that by the fact that it's independently proven by the Johns Hopkins Institute that we are ranked number 2 in the world for COVID preparedness and response.
Okay.
So what we have done and endured has been less than other countries, and we are now laid a platform that needs to be nurtured. And who's best to do that? And if you want to go off and get a warm, fuzzy feeling for the first 5 minutes of voting for an independent or a minor party, all you'll get is chaos and a professional complaints desk sitting outside government that cause chaos and destruction.
Okay. But after the election, if you lose, will the LNP in Queensland split from the Libs to stave off those minor parties?
No, the LNP will stay as it is, and it'll be part of the Liberal and National parties. There'll be no change to that. That is locked in. There is obviously no mood for that. In fact, that's how you form government. That's how you sit inside the tent. That's how you get to cut the checks and make the decisions, particularly as Queenslanders, when you've got cabinet ministers like myself and Peter Dutton, Karen Andrews, Stewie Robert. You know, we're sitting inside that room getting to make the decision, not sitting outside screaming and yelling and giving us all a warm, fuzzy feeling for 5 minutes. We're getting stuff done. We're cutting checks and changing our economy and changing our society for the better. So the LNP won't be going anywhere.
All right, now onto the wages. It's back in focus today with the wage price index due to be announced. If wages rise at 2.5%, as is expected, that's half the rise of inflation, cost of living. A proof point that wages are going backwards. So does this fuel the need to increase the minimum wage?
Well, that's obviously where the Fair Work Commission makes that determination, and they should. And I think it's an institution that the Labor Party has set up themselves and should have that independence, and they take into account factors such as inflation, unemployment rates. They do that in a methodical way that ensures that Australians keep up with that cost of living. But the RBA themselves are saying that over 40% of their employers are now saying that they're probably going to increase wages by more than 3% and some more than 4%. So we're seeing that because we've got the unemployment rate down. and we've got people in employment. So it's simple demand and supply of saying that there's not enough workers to go around, and so to be competitive and to attract workers and to keep workers, up are going wages, and that's because we've invested in this little thing called JobKeeper to get us out of the COVID pandemic and make sure businesses will get moving straight away. That's putting the competitive tension back in the marketplace, the labour marketplace, and that's what will force it up as well. But we need to let the independence of the Fair Work Commission also work through those things, such as the minimum wage, which they did in the agricultural sector, where they put in place a minimum wage, which Anthony Albanese doesn't understand, because in the last debate, he actually said, would we put in place a minimum wage for agricultural workers? Well, it was done and put in place back in April. So I don't know where he's getting his detail, but again, another missed opportunity for Anthony Albanese to show he knows some detail.
Okay, but just a final one here. The Prime Minister yesterday seemed to soften his language about the price rise for those on the minimum wage. Says essentially it's going to be needed. Do you agree with him?
Well, again, I'd like to think that the independence of the Fair Work Commission will get there. And as they did with agricultural workers, they got to that position because they took into account the costs of living. They took into account where the economy is and how we need to make sure that we protect workers, give them a fair day's pay. And I think that obviously we can give advice from the side, but the independence of the Fair Work Commission
and what do you think that should be,
make that determination themselves. Well, with all due respect, I'm not an economist. I'm just a bloke from Western Queensland, so I'll leave it to the economists and the experts. Well, obviously, I think that when you're seeing that inflation, you've got to understand that inflation, that 5.1%, is being pushed up by international factors. Fuel, in particular, the challenges in Ukraine. Treasury are telling us that that'll last for about 6 months, so we've acted swiftly in terms of cutting the excise by 22 cents. There's also, in terms of agricultural production, we've seen real pressures from the floods, and ABARES are telling us that there's probably 6 months for that to come back.
So with all of that
there's some real short-term pressures.
That minimum wage should bump up.
Well, exactly. But the level of that, I think, needs to be determined by the Fair... Okay. Well, again, that's where the Fair Work Commission... Politicians should let the Fair Work Commission make that determination to the level. That's what they're employed to do, and they take into all those economic factors. That's what they will put in place to undertake, and that's what we should allow them to do.
Okay. Well, David Littleproud, appreciate, as always, your time this morning. Thanks for joining us.